The night fell over the African plains like a heavy curtain of smoke. The stars above flickered, but their light never reached the ground. In that suffocating darkness, there was only one sound, the slow, deliberate steps of a predator that did not walk like the others. From the tall grass came a silhouette larger than memory itself. His mane was not just dark, it was thick, heavy, flowing like a black crown forged in fire. His name was Hades, and even before he roared, every creature in the savanna already felt his presence. Lions rule prides, coalitions rule territories, but Hades sought something different. He was not satisfied with land or females alone. He carried in his eyes the hunger of an emperor, the kind of ambition that stretched far beyond what nature had ever allowed. The silence of the night broke when his roar erupted across the valley. It was not the roar of a lion claiming food, nor a call to mates. It was a declaration of war. The wind carried it far, echoing against acacias and stones, reaching hyenas, leopards, even rival lions miles away. None dared to answer. That night, herds of wildebeests shifted their routes. Elephants turned away from waterholes, and even hyena clans, always bold in the dark, chose to scatter into the shadows. The savanna itself bent beneath the weight of his voice. And so began the story of the lion who would not be remembered as just another king. This was the lion who sought crowns not in singular rule, but in empire. An emperor destined to dominate not one, not two, but 3 kingdoms at once. Tonight, we return to the heart of Africa to uncover his rise, his fury, and the empire that bowed beneath him. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear is not just the story of a lion, it's the birth of an immortal emperor. And before we begin, make sure to subscribe and comment where you're watching from, so you can join our pride in uncovering the wildest legends of the animal kingdom. Long before he became the emperor of 3 kingdoms, Hades was nothing more than a vulnerable cub born under a blood-red dawn. His pride was small, pressed between rival coalitions and the constant harassment of hyenas. From the beginning, his life was marked not by abundance, but by hunger, fear, and the daily fight to survive. As a cub, Hades witnessed the brutal death of his father, ambushed at a waterhole by stronger males. The roar of his sire was silenced, and in its echo, young Hades learned his first truth. The savanna does not forgive weakness. From that night on, the fire in his eyes carried both grief and vengeance. Orphaned before his mane even began to grow, Hades endured exile. He wandered with his mother, hiding in tall grasses, feeding on scraps, drinking muddy water when the rivers dried. Predators circled them endlessly, leopards, hyenas, even other lions. Yet even in his smallest frame, there was something untamed, something that refused to bow. By the time he reached adolescence, his body had transformed. Broad shoulders, thick legs, and a mane darker than a storm gave him the look of a shadow risen from the underworld. His first fights were not victories, but brutal lessons, leaving scars across his muzzle and chest, badges that would one day command fear. One night, a coalition of 2 young males tried to chase him from a carcass. Hades did not retreat. He roared, lunged, and fought with a madness they could not match. When dawn came, one rival limped away with torn flesh, and the other lay lifeless in the dust. That was the first whisper of his legend, the lion who did not yield. Soon, his reputation spread. Lone nomads avoided him. Hyenas gave him distance, and even prides began to scatter at his scent. Hades was no longer a wanderer. He was becoming a storm, gathering strength and waiting for the right moment to unleash it. In the savanna, survival shapes destiny, but ambition shapes legends. Hades was not only surviving, he was preparing for something greater. Every scar, every battle, every night of hunger had carved him into a weapon designed not just to live, but to dominate. This was the rise of a lion unlike any other. A lion born in blood, forged in exile, and destined to challenge the natural order. But the question remains, was Hades molded by fate Or did he carve his own destiny with claw and fang? Tell us in the comments. Do you believe kings are born, or are they made through survival? The savanna had seen countless kings rise and fall, but none like the shadow that now walked its plains. Hades was no longer the outcast cub who fed on scraps. He had become a force, a predator whose presence alone twisted the balance of power. His moment had arrived, and the first kingdom would soon fall under his claws. The territory he set his eyes on was controlled by 3 young males, a coalition fresh from victory. They had dethroned an older lion, seized his pride, and believed themselves invincible. But what they had not faced yet was a lion forged in exile, hardened by hunger and fueled by the obsession to dominate. For weeks, Hades stalked the borders of their land. He tested them at night, roaring from the distance, making the ground vibrate under their paws. The rivals answered with their own roars, but their voices cracked with uncertainty. They were kings of comfort. Hades was a king of war. The first clash came at a watering hole under a crescent moon. Dust exploded as claws raked flesh, manes tangled, and roars split the night like thunder. 2 of the brothers fought side by side, but Hades struck with a fury that seemed more beast than lion. He tore one away, sinking his fangs deep into his throat, leaving the water dark with blood. The second tried to circle behind him, but Hades spun, slashing across his muzzle and driving him into the mud. The youngest hesitated, his courage faltering. In that hesitation, the empire of 3 began to crumble. By dawn, 1 was dead, 1 was broken, and the last fled into the wilderness, never to return. The pride that once belonged to them watched in silence. Lionesses, cubs, even scavengers circling nearby knew the truth. The land had a new ruler. Hades roared, standing over the corpse of his fallen enemy, and the sound rolled across the plain like the drums of an empire's coronation. That day, the savanna changed. The first kingdom had fallen. The once stable hierarchy was shattered, replaced by the reign of a lion who took power not with numbers, but with the storm of one. Hades had claimed his first throne, and it was only the beginning. But victory was not enough for him. His hunger grew, his eyes already scanning beyond the horizon for new lands to crush beneath his paws. For Hades, 1 crown was never enough. And so the question is, if 1 lion can rule 1 kingdom through blood, what will it take to rule 3? Share your thoughts. Do you think fear or respect is the true foundation of power in the wild? 1 throne was not enough. For most lions, victory meant rest, stability, the comfort of females and cubs. But Hades was not like the others. His first conquest had only sharpened his hunger. As his roar spread across the land, it carried a promise. 1 kingdom had fallen, and another would follow. The second territory he sought was far more dangerous. It was ruled by a coalition of 4 males, brothers in blood, scarred by countless battles. Together, they had held their pride for years, repelling hyenas, buffalo, and rival lions alike. They were not pretenders. They were warriors. But Hades was something more. He was a conqueror. For days, the air vibrated with their roars. From one ridge to another, the night became an arena of sound, challenges, threats, warnings. The 4 lions tried to intimidate him with their unity, but Hades never answered with fear. Alone, his voice was heavier than their chorus, shaking the plains like the growl of an approaching storm. The battle erupted at dawn, when the mist still clung to the earth. Hades struck first, charging into their midst with the fury of a hurricane. His claws raked across the flank of 1 brother, blood spraying into the air. The coalition swarmed him, biting, slashing, dragging him down. But Hades fought like a beast possessed, a lion sculpted by exile and sharpened by rage. He locked jaws with 1 rival, crushing his throat until the roars turned to silence. Another lunged at his back, but Hades spun, tearing half his ear away in a spray of crimson. The ground shook with the weight of 5 lions colliding, dust rising in a choking cloud, the savanna itself trembling beneath their violence. By midday, the outcome was clear. One of the brothers lay dead in the grass. Another limped with a broken shoulder, and the survivors, battered and bloodied, fled toward the horizon. Behind them, Hades stood alone, mane drenched in blood, chest heaving with the breath of a victor. The second kingdom had fallen. The lionesses of the conquered pride watched from a distance. They had seen their rulers tested and broken. Now, they approached cautiously, circling the dark-maned emperor with eyes wide in awe and fear. In the savanna, strength is law, and Hades had written his judgment in blood. With 2 crowns claimed, Hades had become more than a ruler. He was now a legend in motion, a storm no coalition could contain. Yet his ambition still stretched further. One more throne awaited him, and with it, the birth of an empire unlike anything Africa had ever seen. But what do you think rules longer, the memory of fear or the loyalty of respect? Comment your answer below. With 2 kingdoms already under his mane, most lions would have been content to rest, to secure their bloodline, and to enjoy the spoils of dominance. But Hades was not most lions. His hunger was not for survival or even for glory. It was for empire. And beyond the rivers and thorn trees, another land called to him, vast and wild, ruled by lions who had never known defeat. This third territory was the largest of all, stretching across fertile plains where herds gathered in endless numbers. Its rulers were seasoned veterans, older than Hades, their manes streaked with dust and age, but their eyes still sharp with the fire of experience. They had fought droughts, defended against rival coalitions, and carved their legacy in blood. For years, no lion dared to challenge them, until Hades. He entered their land not with stealth, but with thunder. Night after night, his roars rolled across the valley, shaking trees, sending wildebeests scattering. The 2 elder males roared back, unwilling to show weakness, but deep inside, they knew a storm had arrived. Hades was not just another rival, he was the embodiment of conquest itself. The clash came at dusk, when the sky burned crimson, and the air was thick with dust. Hades met them head-on, no hesitation, his body colliding with theirs in an eruption of claws, fangs, and fury. The battle was not swift, it was a war carved into the earth. Blood painted the grass, roars split the horizon, and vultures circled above, waiting for the savanna to decide who would rule. One of the veterans lunged with surprising strength, locking his jaws into Hades's flank, but the emperor twisted, driving his claws deep into the old lion's throat. With a sickening crack, the elder collapsed, choking on dust and blood. The second fought on, but exhaustion betrayed him. Hades raked across his muzzle, blinding him in one eye, and with a final surge, crushed him into the earth. When the dust settled, the plains lay silent. The herds had fled miles away, the scavengers waited nervously, and the lionesses of the Third Kingdom emerged from the shadows. They had lost their rulers, but before them stood something far greater than a king. They bowed, not in choice, but in instinct. The savanna itself seemed to bend. Hades had done what no lion before him had dared to dream. He held 3 thrones at once. His territory stretched farther than the horizon, his roars carried farther than thunder, and his name was whispered by predators and prey alike. He was not simply feared, he was worshipped. In that moment, the savanna did not belong to lions, hyenas, or elephants. It belonged to him alone. Hades, the emperor of 3 kingdoms. But tell us, do you think true power comes from sheer strength or from the fear it creates in the hearts of others? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The savanna had never seen such silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of submission. From the smallest jackal to the largest elephant, every creature altered its path when the shadow of Hades lingered near. He was no longer just a lion. He was an empire of flesh and fury, and the land itself trembled beneath his rule. With 3 kingdoms under his claws, Hades controlled vast herds, endless watering holes, and dozens of prides. His roars no longer announced his presence. They declared ownership. Rival lions did not even attempt to enter his borders. Hyena clans, usually bold in the night, abandoned their dens and scattered to safer grounds. The balance of the wild had shifted. The lionesses of his conquered prides accepted his reign with cautious respect. They had seen him tear through coalitions and veterans alike, and they knew resistance meant death. Yet, under his rule, cubs thrived. The abundance of land and prey gave his bloodline a chance to flourish, but with that abundance came the mark of tyranny. Every roar of Hades was a reminder that their lives belonged to him. His presence reshaped the movements of entire ecosystems. Herds of wildebeest avoided valleys where his scent lingered. Leopards abandoned trees, unable to withstand the weight of his dominance. Even crocodiles in riverbeds stirred warily when he approached to drink, as if they too recognized the anomaly in their kingdom. For Hades, ruling was not about rest. Each day he patrolled his borders relentlessly, covering miles of savanna, marking trees, and leaving trails of blood when intruders crossed. His mane, blackened with dust and streaked with scars, made him look like a phantom risen from the underworld. His reign was not soft or merciful, it was absolute. The stories began to spread. Maasai herders whispered of the lion whose roar shook huts in the night. Travelers spoke of tracks as wide as their hands, etched deep into the soil. To them, Hades was no longer an animal. He was a spirit of war, a demon crowned in gold and shadow. But even empires are not without cost. Hades's battles had carved deep wounds across his body, and though he stood undefeated, the scars whispered of the toll he had paid. Still, no rival dared to test him. Fear itself had become his most loyal army, stronger than any coalition of lions. In this age of silence, where one roar commanded 3 kingdoms, the savanna seemed eternal under his shadow. Yet the question remained: how long can an emperor hold what even nature never intended to be ruled by one? Tell us, do you believe fear can build an empire that lasts, or does fear always carry the seeds of downfall? For years, the savanna bent under the rule of Hades. Rivals avoided his borders, hyenas scattered at the scent of his mane, and even elephants altered their migration to avoid his empire. Yet time, invisible and merciless, is the one predator no lion can defeat. Its claws are silent, but its wounds cut deeper than any battle. The first cracks appeared in the endless march of patrols. Once tireless, Hades began to slow. His steps, though still powerful, carried the weight of battles etched into his bones. His mane, once thick and black as a storm cloud, began to show streaks of dust and age. Still, even in decline, his presence was enough to send lesser lions fleeing. Rivals began to test him. Nomadic males, young, unscarred, desperate for land, ventured too close to his borders. They came not alone but in coalitions, believing numbers could succeed where legends faltered. But when they faced him, even wounded and aging, Hades's fury erupted like the roar of a dying god. Many never returned. In one of his last great battles, 3 young brothers entered his second kingdom, roaring for dominance. The clash that followed was chaos. Dust storms, blood spraying through the air, and the thunder of bodies colliding. Hades fought like a lion possessed, his jaws crushing, his claws ripping. 2 brothers fled, broken, and the third never rose from the ground. The emperor had held his throne once more, but victory no longer came without cost. Wounds healed slower. His muscles ached from the effort of battles that would have been effortless years before. Each scar carried the memory of triumph, but also the reminder of what time was taking from him. Hyenas, sensing his weariness, returned in larger packs, circling bolder than before. At night, their laughter pierced the silence, testing his strength, waiting for the moment when the emperor would falter. Still, every time they closed in, Hades roared, and for now, the clan still scattered into the dark. Even as the shadow of time grew heavier, Hades remained unbroken. He still walked his empire, still silenced the plains with his voice, still held the loyalty of his prides. But the savanna whispered of change. Every reign has its dusk, and the horizon was painted in the colors of inevitability. And so the question lingered across the plains. How long can strength alone defy the march of time? Tell us in the comments, do you think legends die in battle, or do they fade slowly into myth? The dusk of Hades' reign came not with the thunder of another battle, but with the slow march of time. His roars, once sharp as lightning, grew deeper, echoing like distant drums across the plains. Yet even weakened, his shadow lingered. Every scar, every crown, every conquest carved into the earth remained proof that one lion had ruled what nature itself had declared impossible. Long after his steps grew heavy, the savanna still whispered his name. Herds moved cautiously through valleys where his scent once lingered. Hyenas avoided the waterholes where his claws had stained the mud with blood. Even other lions, young and fierce, paused at the memory of the emperor who had once bent 3 kingdoms beneath a single roar. For the prides he conquered, Hades became more than a ruler. He became the silent law of survival. Lionesses passed his story to their cubs, not as history, but as warning. They spoke of the black-maned emperor who rose from exile, who killed kings, who silenced coalitions, and who reshaped the wild with his will alone. To the Maasai, who had watched from a distance, Hades was no longer a beast, but a spirit. They told stories around fires of a lion, whose roar was heard even in dreams, a creature sent by the gods to remind men that no wall, no spear, no warrior could ever rule the savanna the way he did. In the end, Hades disappeared into the silence he once commanded. No lion claimed to see his last breath. No scavenger was said to feast on his body. Some believed he died alone beneath the stars, others that he walked into the river and let the current carry him away. But for many, Hades did not die. He became part of the land itself. His legacy was not measured in cubs, nor in territory marked, but in fear and awe that lingered beyond his life. He was not remembered as a king, for kings can be replaced. He was remembered as an emperor, one whose rule stretched beyond borders, beyond bloodlines, into myth itself. And even now, when a storm rolls across the plains, when the wind howls through the acacias, some say they hear him again, not as a lion of flesh and claw, but as the eternal spirit of conquest, the emperor who once ruled 3 kingdoms at once. This is the legacy of Hades, a lion who turned survival into empire, who bent nature to his will, and who left behind a legend larger than life itself. But now we ask you, do you believe Hades' empire will live forever in memory? Or will time one day bury even the greatest of emperors? Share your answer below, and join us as we continue unveiling the untold legends of the wild.